Persona 5 wasn't inevitable. In 2013, the studio behind it, Atlus, was caught inside a corporate implosion. Their parent company, Index, was collapsing under massive fraud and debt. Both the president and CEO were arrested for falsifying financial records. And poor Atlus was just another asset on the chopping block. As such, the sequel to a beloved JRPG, Persona 4 almost never happened. This is the story of how Atlus nearly vanished, and how SEGA, a company still licking its own wounds from a precipitous decline, made one of the best decisions in business history. Atlus wasn't always the cult juggernaut we know today. Back in the 2000s, they were that cool, slightly offbeat dude who brought weird but brilliant games to the party. These included titles like Shin Megami Tensei, its spin-off series Persona, and Trauma Center. They weren't making blockbuster hits, but were instead swinging for genre-defining works. These were thematically dark, stylish, and with mechanically rich gameplay. These games were off the beaten path, but had a niche following and strong word of mouth. If you didn't see my last video on the return of the JRPG, this era was not a commercial peak for the genre. In fact, popularity would continue to wane for several more years. While Atlus was figuratively rich with creative vision, they were literally financially unstable. Thus, in 2006, Atlus got acquired by Index Holdings, a conglomerate that was rapidly collecting subsidiaries like toys, with a questionable strategy and allegedly criminal tactics. Index wasn't a household name, even in Japan. They were a sprawling media conglomerate, sort of like Kadokawa is today, dabbling in advertising, mobile games, and other miscellaneous side quests. Atlus was just an item in their doomed shopping cart. But to be fair, they kept delivering. Persona 4 Golden and Catherine both came about under Index's reign, but the parent company itself? Quietly turning into a slow-motion train wreck, over-leveraged, poorly managed, and flying off the rails. While Atlus was in their bubble quietly making masterpieces, Index was setting fire to the treasury. Persona 5 was already in production by P Studio, one of Atlus's subsidiary creative teams. Pre-production started in 2008, and full development kicked off after Catherine's launch in 2011. But suddenly, everything was up in the air. Fast forward to June 2013, and Index was starting to unravel. There were allegations of financial misconduct along with crippling debt, and an investigation forced the company to file bankruptcy. These are the kind of headlines that make shareholders on the Tokyo Stock Exchange jump ship fast. The studio was worried about survival itself. Studio head Katsura Hashino, the director of Persona 5, was quoted, "There were also the circumstances that affected our company which made the development progress quite unstable. There were periods, one after another, where I had no idea what would happen going forward." End quote. If you've ever worked on a complex project, funding uncertainty does not instill confidence in members of the team. I can only imagine that this would be even more fear-inducing on a creative project, where there are people with integral knowledge who are not replaceable. The next year, the former CEO of Index, Masami Ochiai, would be arrested. But Atlus, despite being renamed to Index, was still intact and still chock full of its talent pool, but now technically owned by a sinking ship. Atlus itself wasn't bankrupt, but they weren't exactly safe either. They were caught in a liminal corporate purgatory studios often go to die. And then Q Stage left. Good old SEGA shows up, right on time. But first, let's be clear. SEGA in 2013 was not exactly riding high. They were still licking their wounds from their own respective fall from grace. The Dreamcast, long dead. Sonic was not at his commercial peak, and their glory days were rapidly transitioning into a nostalgic blur. But SEGA saw something in Atlus. Perhaps it was the consistency or the vibe. Maybe someone in-house on the M&A team was a fan of Nocturne. Maybe the old synergy buzzword got thrown around the boardroom at Sega Sammy's HQ in Shinagawa. Anyways, point is they saw a deal. They bought Index's cumulative assets for about $140 million. But what really mattered is what they didn't do. They didn't micromanage. They let Atlus stay Atlus. Development on Persona 5 was stabilized as the funding pipeline was once more secured. And after just a few more years of development in 2016 in Japan, one of the best JRPGs of all time was released to critical acclaim and a massive commercial breakthrough. So why does this matter? Well, the story could have ended very differently. As a matter of fact, it usually does. Corporate acquisitions tend to crush what made studios special. Budgets get slashed and cohesive teams get scattered. When new management comes in, you're given the official Kool-Aid to drink. Get with it or get out. There were rumors swirling that Atlus was going to take on SEGA IP for their future endeavors. But what happened was somewhat surprising. SEGA, itself a bit scrappy at this time, had Atlus's back, not by fixing the studio, but by letting them cook. As such, Persona 5 became more than just a game for Atlus. It symbolized a few things. First, how to be resilient during the development process and true to your vision, even in shaky times. Next, how if you're taking over something, to not meddle in it. So kudos to SEGA. Beyond that also was a game that became an inflection point in the series, maturing from the PS2 chippy designs into a more fully fledged and fleshed out project with few compromises that courted an international fan base. Today, Atlus is thriving. Shin Megami Tensei 5, Unicorn Overlord, Metaphor ReFantasio. This wasn't just a save on Sega's part. It was a revival, a second lease on life. A cautionary tale with a happy ending, and also one that shows just how fleeting some of the most remarkable creative studios are, always living on the edge. Persona 5 didn't save Atlus. SEGA did. But Atlus made damn sure it was worth it. If you like this video, stick around for more. I wonder how many times I said Atlus in this video. Peace!